And we are live. Thanks to everybody for joining us today for our special panel today. Actually, let me introduce myself first. My name is R.O.G.Y, Vice President at Centercourt Sports Academy. This discussion is going to be part of our Centercourt webinar series, which we have developed to keep all of you engaged in the tennis world, in the nutrition world, in the fitness world. And we've been having a great panel of guests. Today, our main topic is going to be developing junior players today and before, comparing and contrasting the development of successful junior tennis players in the days before R.O.G.Y. And today, R.O.G.Y is red, orange, green, and yellow. Our special guests today are going to be Coach Jose Funes. Jose is the director of our junior development program at Centercourt. Coach Adam Borr is our performance and red ball edge lead coach and renowned USPTA performance clinician. And his daughter, Lexi Borr, will be joining us as well. She's a former high-ranking national junior and collegiate player. Lexi was top 10 in the US in 18 and under age group. She received an all ACC conference honors as a junior and a senior at Boston College and earned a collegiate high ranking of 30 in the nation. She is a certified nutritional therapy practitioner and health blogger. She is in the process of opening up her own restaurant as well. So welcome to everybody listening. Please feel free to throw any questions into the chat or into the Q&A. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Jose to begin our discussion.
Thank you very much, Ari. Yes, welcome everyone out there. This is a part of a series we've been trying to do on topics that we think are valuable to both coaches and to people outside of both Centercourt and other places. Obviously, junior development is a big topic at Centercourt, is a big part of what we do and who we are. And then, I think it's an interesting perspective. Usually a lot of this webinars have been an awful lot about, clinicians talking about theories and ideas and philosophies that are well rooted in a lot of, good science, tennis science. What I thought would be sort of a really interesting thing about this topic would be to actually not just have a couple of coaches, Adam and I, discussing what has changed in the years, but also having a player, a former junior player like Lexi, who is by all standards was a very successful collegiate player, was a very successful high school player, therefore a successful junior. So there are some things that are very unique about the relationship of, Lexi and Adam, besides being parents, also the coach. But I thought it would be a really, really fun thing. There's a lot of questions I have personally to both of them. So, just to give myself a little quick bio, and then we'll go around the virtual room. I am indeed Jose Funes, the Director of Junior Player Development. I specialize in, 10 and under, which is the primarily use of R.O.G.Y, the transitional balls and the smaller courts progressively used for development. Let me send it over to Adam and then to Lexi so that they can, give a little bit more bio on them if they like to.
Hello, my name is Adam Borr. I'm a lead coach of Red Ball Edge. I've been in the center for 2 years now. I enjoy it. I love the whole aspect of Centercourt and how they've embraced the R.O.G.Y system, red, orange, green, yellow. And I really enjoy working with the Red Ball Edge and all the orange ball. And it's to develop the junior players. It's a much more easy and centralized way to be efficient with daily practices and competitions, because when you play with when you train with the R.O.G.Y balls, whatever one you're using, and then you do competitions with the same ball, you have the learning in the training and the competing is the same. Well, a lot of the problems I had training with Lexi is I would feed her the yellow ball from the baseline and develop the nice swing path and contact point, and then going to the tournaments and the competitions, then the point of contact would be everywhere. So yeah, that's why I really enjoy working at Centercourt and the R.O.G.Y system. Okay.
Yeah. So, Lexi, if you like to add a little bit something more about yourself, I think we covered a lot of stuff. Obviously, you had a great career record at Westfield High. You won the state's titles as well, correct?
Yeah, I won states my senior year, and then I went to Boston College, played for Boston College, had a good career there, played first, second singles, and first doubles, and then I graduated and I went back to school to study nutrition. And then that evolved, and I worked as a nutritionist for a year, and then I really got into the food aspect of it and the cooking and the culinary side, and I started my own business almost a year ago now called Lexi's Kitchen. So I'm living here in Westfield, and I make all sorts of healthy treats and snacks and meals, and I supply to local retailers, and I'm hoping to open my own place and sell online and really grow my own business. So that's what I'm doing now. And
Good.
I play and teach a little bit on the side, and tennis is still a big part of my life.
No, and I think that was one of the reasons why I thought this was an interesting topic. I mean, obviously, by all definitions of what tennis coaches, would set forth, you were a very successful junior player. You had success along the ranks. You transferred that success to high school competition as you grew up, and then to collegiate success as you grew older. Now, Adam was mentioning a little bit some of the things that he sort of immediately noticed, and I know that it's not unusual. Obviously, people have seen this if they have any experience with developing players. We can do a lot of stuff in a controlled setting, the practice, and then the matches. It's a free-for-all. Balls fly wherever they may go, whatever speed, etc. Now, can you tell us, like, a little bit, like, when did you start playing tennis?
I don't think there was like one day that I started. I think I probably had a racket in my hand before I could even really walk. And then I was always on a tennis court. So I was probably, when was I like making contact? I don't know.
2, 3, 4. When she was 4 years old, we bought a rebound net for her, and she was hitting 300-400 balls a day on the rebound net.
Now, I have to ask you, so obviously you're playing for fun, you like it a lot. And did you notice when you started competing that there was something, obviously this different, it's competitive, but did you feel there was a difference between your training with your dad or any other coach, and then suddenly you go to these competitions and it's like, why is everybody hitting so soft? Why is everybody hitting so high? Could you feel the difference, or were you just focused on the match play?
Well, I think it is all I knew, really. I mean, I never used any of these low pressure balls, but I'm only 5'4" now, so I was definitely on the smaller side. So balls, and I was always playing, I was playing 10 and unders when I was like 8. So I was playing against, people that were bigger than me, and the ball was bouncing over my head. And I think it really dictated the progression of the style of my game, because balls are bouncing over my head. So I'm using a super Western grip so that I can get it. And, as a result, my game was mostly very defensive, and I never really, I did have some offense, but for the majority of my career, I had to try and keep up, because I think that's how I learned to play, was just to stay really back, like almost at the curtain, because I needed to wait for the ball to come down. I wasn't taking balls on the rise in a Western grip. So I think it did dictate, because it was so, balls were bouncing way over my head. And so that's why I developed the game style that I did, I think.
Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, Adam, I mean, you and I have had extensive conversations. We're colleagues, and we constantly have these conversations about, the physical some of the physical issues that Lexi's mentioning there, right? You get these players, and we've seen very talented 5-year-olds with great natural instincts, great natural hands, and then you run into these issues, which is not to say that, that the yellow ball is some criminal effort, but you run into these issues, and then you find yourself having to do a lot of backtrack. I mean, that's certainly, without me sort of trying to get too far ahead of the speech that I tend to give in this, it's a reason why I like the progressional balls so much. They allow me to do things under a very controlled environment. Now, I know that you obviously saw the balls, you used the balls as a coach. Now that you're sort of at a different place, what do you think how do you think that you would have used the balls with Lexi? I know obviously it's revisionist history, but if you sort of had to do this all over again, would you see a place for them, or you kind of see her track going very similar to what she did before?
Well, if I had to do it all over again, and I had the luxury of having the R.O.G.Y balls, I would look at it as it would be much easier to train for specific things, and basically the strike zone. So she could, the amount of man hours it took to train Lexi was crazy. Okay. And it was crazy because she needed a hit from the baseline, because that's where the court was. She was actually 7 when she was playing 10 and under tournaments. So, I had to keep her on the baseline, and I had to feed her expertly, get the ball right inside her strike zone as a little 7-year-old. It was very hard, and not every pro could do it, because you had to put the ball into such a small window every time you fed the ball to her. And then, she would have her strokes grooved really nice. And then, you go to, you're done with training days, and you go to competition days. And then in competition days, you throw it all out the window. So it was frustrating, but there was no other way at the time. And so, to look back, if she grew up with the R.O.G.Y system, she could on competition days, she could reinforce what she did on the practice days.
Right. No, I think that's one of the things that obviously we as coaches, you and I both grew up with the yellow balls. So by no means am I ever going to say that it was a horrible, horrible system, but I agree with you. It's a tremendous advantage to be able to do competitive things. We often talk about, we want to toughen up our best players. We want to make them better competitors. And to me, peer competition is so important, right? I played junior tennis, not nearly as well as Lexi did, not nearly as well as you did, Adam. So to me, it was like, when I did play older kids, it was a lot less pressure. I don't know how you felt about that, Lexi, playing as one of the youngers. Obviously, you were a good tennis player, so you were playing up continuously in age groups, I assume. And I know there's a lot of other sports specialists that have come in previous webinars, and they discussed a lot about the training, not just with us, but other webinars, about how it's important for players to sort of outpace their peers. Yes, it's good to play above age group, but then you also need to play within your peers. For you, did you feel more or less pressure when you would be like maybe one of the youngest seeded players in a tournament?
So I actually never really played up. When I was 7, there was no age group for me. So I did play the 10 and unders, but I think one thing that I actually steadily did throughout my whole career is I played in the 12s until I was 12. A lot of my people my age did do the playing up. But I always stayed in my age group. And I actually think that was good, because, it's definitely harder to be the first seed in a tournament than it is to be the underdog and be playing, just nothing to lose against the first seed. There definitely was times where I was highly seeded, and I did feel that pressure more so than when I was maybe the younger person or not expected to win. Like I loved playing against like the top girls because like I didn't put any pressure on myself, and I ended up, you know, swinging out and not getting tight or anything.
Right.
There's definitely much more pressure when you're playing against your peers.
Yeah.
When you're playing against people that, you know, if you're a junior playing against adults, or if you're, you know, 12 and you're playing against 14 and 16-year-olds, there's no pressure there. So, you know, pressure tennis is competitive and is.
Yeah, I remember like even in college, like my senior year, I felt so much more pressure because I'm a senior, I'm playing one for Boston College, and I'm playing like this young freshman from UNC who's like, what, like 18, I don't know how old, but like has nothing to lose and is just like wailing from behind the baseline and is just like, you know, playing like the best tennis of her life. And, you know, like it's just, there's definitely that pressure there when you're the oldest, more experienced one.
So Adam, it sounds like that was a purposeful then part of your plan. You know, you wanted to keep her. That was your vision then in terms of competitive training. Get her to stay within the peer groups. That was a purposeful move then.
Yeah, unless she was so much better than her peers, and her peers were outstanding. And yeah, so it's more, you get more out of playing against your peers than playing way up in age groups. So then you have nothing to lose. So you have more to lose when you're playing against your peers, and the tennis is going to be better.
It's good to feel pressure. Yeah, I think it's
Pressure's
healthy.
good.
If you never feel that, then
If you're always playing up, then you don't know how to play under pressure.
Well, I think that, you know, obviously I've heard of other coaches who feel the same way as you do, and I've heard other coaches who feel it's important to kind of mix all of them, the underdog capacity, the you know, being the favorite capacity. So obviously, I guess at the end of the day, what really matters, I think we could all agree on, is pressure, right? We need to players need to train under and compete under some level of pressure, because if you're going to be a really, really successful junior player, you can't just, you got to face it at some point.
Right.
I think that's probably what we would all agree on.
And being in the Northeast, there was always the endorsement list. You know, you had to play a certain number of tournaments. If you wanted to play Super Nationals, you had to play a certain number of tournaments in that age group. So if you played up,
right,
then you couldn't get into Super Nationals because there's only so many weeks of the year.
Fascinating. Yes, I keep forgetting about that. I know they made some changes in that respect. Now, there was a question before in the chat, and I think it goes well into the other background of this conversation about, you know, the relationship, you know, being the father and the coach. Somebody asked if, like, and I know your sisters also play tennis. Did you train alongside your sisters, or was it individual? It was just, you know, you and your dad, or was it a family thing?
I mean, tennis was everything in our family growing up. My older sister is 2 years older than me, so we were pretty close in age. So like when we were younger, we were on the court together a lot. My younger sister, she's a lot younger, so she's 5 years younger. So we didn't really grow up in the same way together on the court. So I never played with my younger sister, but me and my older sister, we were on the court a lot together. But I think what made me a little bit unique was that, like, after an hour, maybe my sister, like, you know, most kids would, you know, lose interest or do something else, but I only had tennis on my mind 24/7. So I think I probably had like 4 or 5 hour days just because I wanted to. Like it was never like I didn't know anything else. It was just like, it was everything.
Right.
Yeah, Adam,
Now,
I was going to ask you, what's the good and bad of you know, training your own, you know, your own children or your own daughter, your own daughters? Like, what are, you know, what are the challenges, and what are the positives?
Well, the positive is you get to spend all day with your kids, and and that's great. You know, that's how can it be better than that? And you know, we weren't really concerned with, you know, it can be bad if you get overly concerned with winning and losing and rankings and endorsements, and and all these things. But, you know, if you train hard and you are productive on the court and you know, we had a sort of a calendar of things that we wanted to do in terms of technique, in terms of fitness, and in terms of tournaments to play. So we would always have you know, like certain things that we want to do in terms of fitness for these few months, and for another few months, we really wanted to work on an aspect of maybe volleys and approaches, and then, you know, the serve was always something where we always try to improve on. So, you know, we were always trying to accomplish things with tennis and spend a lot of time together. And we never put so much pressure on it that we would, you know, spend time arguing or having resentment towards one another. I can't remember that at all. It just flowed.
Yeah, that's the thing. So, like, after a match, are you more coach or more dad? Because you have to balance, I guess, right? There's
some certain rules, like, you know, after a loss, you don't talk about the match on the way home. I mean, that's just basic. You know, a lot of people don't understand that, but, you know, give it a day after a loss to talk about it. You know, if you won the match, you know, of course, nobody can wait. You know, let's talk about the match. Let's talk about the match. Remember? But, you know, if she lost, you know, we'd give her a day. You know, maybe you shouldn't hit your backhand down the line quite so much, or maybe, you know, you try to hit it high to your opponent's backhand some more before you hit the drop shot, or, you know, certain basic tennis things. You know, tennis was the easy thing. Dealing with people and dealing with relationships, that requires more thought.
Interesting. I know Coach Conrad Singh. Coach Conrad is the COO of our you know, Performance Academy at Centercourt, and he had a couple of questions. He asked a question for all panelists, and I know he was asking about the dropout rate. I mean, currently the statistics for junior girls is staggeringly high. I think a lot of them drop out before they reach the age of 16. Obviously, not just junior girls, but kids in general in junior tennis. So I certainly would love to find out, and so with Coach Conrad, you know, if, you know, how was Lexi's perspective in the locker room? Did she realize that friends were sort of, you know, sort of thinning out? I mean, I know as a coach, I certainly have my thoughts on that, but I think I really would love to hear from Lexi as to what she saw out there, and maybe Adam afterwards, maybe what your perspective was as a father and as a coach. Because, I mean, so I guess the short question is, did you notice, Lexi, that there was a thinning out of the herd?
Definitely. I feel like, you know, you could see it happen, like a couple bad losses, a couple bad tournaments, you know, you could see when people were just not happy on the court, and it became something that was just not fun. And like people just slowly fizzled out, like, as, you know, all the time. And it just got more and more. I mean, by the end, by the 18s, there was only a few left. I mean, you know, it's definitely a huge thing. And I think it comes from like just the pressure and the emotional toll that it takes. This is like, I mean, you're all alone out there, you're in your head, it's so mental. I mean, I think as frequent as physical injuries are, I don't think it has anything to do with that. It has everything to do with just like not being able to handle the pressure that you put on yourselves, or the pressure that coaches or family puts on you. And as you get older, you realize like there's even more pressure because, you know, maybe you're going for a college scholarship, and it just all becomes too much.
Right. Adam, did you see it? Did you notice it? Did you, you know, that, you know, obviously you have a unique perspective. You're a father watching the matches, but you're also a coach, and you're also training other people's kids.
Yeah. You know, when you start out, there's a whole bunch of aspiring young girls, and they all look the same. They all have their hair pulled back the same way. Their racket bags are all bigger than they are, and they're dragging them to the tennis court. And, you know, as the years go on, it's just like, you know, another one bites the dust, you know, they don't want to do it anymore. You know, they get interested in boys, they get more academic interest, they have this thing or that thing.
They don't want to travel every single weekend, maybe.
Right.
Like they want to have some sort of social life in high school. There's
No, I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, you know, obviously, you know, we at Centercourt are a large place. And so we get players very young who eventually develop at some high levels. And so we see that, you know, I've had the pleasure of seeing a lot of young kids who, like your dad says, like Adam says, they'll show up, you know, they're tiny, full of energy. They love the game just for the love of it. And then it starts transforming a little bit because, you know, there is pressure. I mean, it's an individual game. I mean, when I played soccer, football, you know, if I had a bad day and we won, that was fine. If it didn't, you know, it's you know, it wasn't the end of the world. You know, we had pizza, ice cream after a loss. Tennis, my dad left me alone for like days.
I know.
I was a sore loser as could be, but I was young and my ego was very fragile. Right? I mean, it wasn't, you know, right now, I mean, you know, I'll get in a fight with someone and 5 seconds later, you know, we're hanging out in beers. I mean, but as a kid, you know, everything for me was tennis. I had a good tennis tournament. It was a great 2 weeks. I had a bad tennis tournament. It was a horrendous month until the next one. Now, Coach Conrad had another interesting question. Now, well, let's see. I mean, hopefully it leads somewhere. Were you peers at all with Naomi Osaka?
Yeah, I played her probably a handful of times.
Now, and this is a question I also will ask Adam. I mean, you know, did you as you played her, did you ever say to yourself, God, this girl's gonna go really far?
Not one time.
I don't think I ever lost a game to her.
Right.
I beat her 0-0. I mean, we were young.
Right. It's fascinating. I mean, to me, that's a great question by Coach Conrad, because I get that question asked a lot. As a director of junior development, you know, one of the things you have to do a lot is you're asked to put on your magician's hat and sort of look at the crystal ball and predict. And obviously the answer that I most often give and most often annoys parents to no end is like, I don't know. I have to cut your player open and see what's inside. You know, there are players who I've seen of all, you know, and then I'd love to get your perspective on the intangibles. But I look at, I've had young players that are like the best 5-year-olds athletically that I've seen. They don't just walk, they run, they jump, they land on one foot for split step volley, you know, and then you know, they grow up to be 14 and they're
Heavy on the foot.
They don't have the size. They don't have the strength. They don't have the vision. Or they just simply grew into another sport. I mean, obviously, the post-puberty and pre-puberty are two different stages. You know, pre-puberty, and then it's a reset. And I know that, you know, the intangibles are always there. I mean, those don't change that much. But sometimes, you know, you need a little help. I was 5'8", so I knew pretty early in my high school career that was going to be the highlight. I played a little college tennis because I loved it, not because anyone was knocking down at my door. But you know, maybe start this time with Lexi and then with Adam. I mean, do you feel like there's any way to look at any crystal ball?
Well, I definitely think like height and you know, just body type has something to do with it. But also I think game style is an interesting thing to look at. I mean, I had the game style that I outlasted everyone in the juniors. Like I said earlier, I'm only 5'4", but I ran every single ball down and I never missed. And most juniors just didn't want to hang anymore. And I just annoyed people to the point where they were just gonna like hit the ball in the curtain because they just didn't want to do it anymore. And I was just like, I don't know if anyone in this chat has ever watched me play, but I mean, I'm probably one of the most intense people to play against. I mean, like I don't give away a point. If I give away a point, like, you know, it's rare, or you hit a winner, you know, so it's like I made people really work for it. But I didn't have the offense that really took me to the next level in the professional type of tournaments. But I think like Naomi Osaka, like she went big, and it didn't work when she was 10. Like she was hitting the ball in the curtain, and I was just like getting it back and, you know, rallying with her, and like she couldn't last. But like, I think it's really, really, it's much easier to rein it in than it is to pick it up. So like the thing that held me back was that I couldn't bring the offense. And at a certain level, I needed that, and I couldn't do it. But she had the offense. She just needed to stop missing so much. And I think it's much easier for players to settle down than it is to like tell someone who's like naturally just more defensive and not as naturally just like, you know, gutsy and just gonna like go big. Like I needed to go bigger, and I couldn't, I was too afraid to miss. And I think that's really hard to get over, that fear. I was so afraid to lose, but I never played, you know, I always played afraid to lose. And so that went really well in the juniors because no one was more afraid to lose than I was. But like no, Naomi Osaka, like she just went for it, and like now they're landing in. Like she had a little spin, and like, you know, she got really physically fit, and, you know, she really sharpened it up. So I don't know.
But I remember the Osakas as being very little. Now they're huge. So they grew a great deal. There were two sisters. There's two sisters. And I always remember them as being very short.
But they had like no fear. Like they just like went for it. Like they walked off the court the same way, whether they won or lost, which is interesting.
You know, it's fascinating as I hear you both talk, and obviously, you know, I've spoken more often with your dad in coffee table moments about all this, you know, because it's something that we hear a lot in performance development symposiums. You know, obviously I've seen it a little bit as well. So it's not just simply, to me, it's not just some book. It's that patience, right? We talk about patience, you know. Building a player is like building it's like building a building, a tall building, especially if you want the success. I mean, sometimes I get parents and I ask them, what do you want? You want him to be the best 8-year-old in New Jersey, or do you want him to be the best player they can be when they are 16, 17, 18? I mean, those to me are the times when it really matters, right? You're playing for high school competition. I mean, not to say that junior tournaments, when you're an orange ball player or a red ball player or a green ball player, those tournaments, they matter to you. But in terms of the big picture, right? I think one of the things that we're selling a lot, if such a thing as selling something, is we're selling patience. I mean, you guys seem to strike a tone about that was a very conscious plan, whether it was simply outlasting your opponent on the court, or when you know, Adam was putting together your game. I mean, that's a great quality. I mean, it's easy to talk about patience. I mean, I as a coach have experience. You know, you when you get a very talented athlete, you want to see the results today, tomorrow. Hey, didn't we just cover the volleys last week? What happened? Did you forget everything? And then sometimes I catch myself going like, of course you did. You forgot everything. You're 9. You forgot most of what I said the moment you walked out the door. I mean, so patience is a big element, right? I mean, I forget about it, and I certainly, that would be my advice to a lot of parents. You know, stay patient. It's so easy to say. It sounds so cliche, but it's so true. It's such a long road. I mean, for you, Adam, did you ever go through a process where you went like, oh God, why am I doing this?
No, I loved it. And I still love it. I love working on, you know, basic fundamentals, and then match play, and then sending the kids out there and having them compete. You know, I haven't stopped. You know, I love doing it, and I never get tired of it.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously, tennis coaches, we have our own stake. Now, one of the other topics we really wanted to cover was a lot of that parent, child coach relationship. That's a tough one to cover. I mean, I know I say that, and every time I start saying that, you're like, I don't know what you're talking about, Jose. I mean, I have a 4-year-old, and everybody says, oh, you're going to be working with him every day. And I'm like, oh, God, no, because 99% of the parents I've met are really great parents, and they're wonderful with their kids, and they understand the process. And then there's that 1% that really turn you off. And I know that they're not trying to do anything wrong. I mean, the one thing I learned by becoming a parent is you get it wrong a lot, but you do it with the best of intentions. I mean, so did you notice? I mean, did you know, Adam, that you were an anomaly in some ways?
Well, I never said that today we're going to work on this, or we're going to work hard today. We're going to work extra hard. When you're developing junior tennis players, I try never to use the word work. Okay. Because we're going to play tennis, and we're going to have fun playing tennis. And we might be focusing on volleys or paying attention to the continental grip while we're doing this, but we're always going to be playing. And it's all about playing, having fun, and getting better. So I think that's when people that are too intense working with children get off track, is they are accentuating work instead of play. You can play, and you can improve, and you can develop, and it's fun. But once you start putting in 9 to 5 work in there with developing athletes, when they graduate college, they could go to work. Okay, they're all going to be working then. But now they're kids, and I was lucky enough to play tennis with Lexi and her sisters for a lot of years, and I can say that we never worked. It was never work.
No. It was always like, look at this cool thing that I made. Like, we're going to play tennis with like a cheese board today. Or he'd like make all sorts of different, in his mind, he was thinking like, oh, this would be really good because it'll help work on this skill or this coordination or something. But like, he'd be like, this is a game I thought of, like, let's play this game. And so it was always different and changing. And it was never like, okay, now I'm going to go to tennis practice and we're going to do like 100 forehands in a row. Like, it was never that.
So then what happens when you go off to college, and then I guess, Adam's obviously not around, and then you have to change your game at all? You obviously have new coaching. Do you just kind of take what you learned growing up and you use that? Or does anything change in your game?
I think it definitely is a transition when you go to college, especially from being coached by your parents to having like a more formal coaching system. Especially, it's not like as private, it's like, you're on a team. So there's 10 players or 12 players, and it's definitely more like drilling and cross courts. And so it definitely wasn't as exciting and fun, but you do have a team. So that aspect is more fun, but different.
Now, that's actually, I'd like to follow up a little bit on that question that Ari asked. I mean, what about on the coaching side? I mean, your dad was your primary coach. I would hazard almost exclusively your coach. Then you go to college. I mean, and did you ever find yourself saying, I need to check this out with dad first? Or did you feel like, what, I'm in college, this is my college coach, I'm going to trust him, and we're going to do this his way? Or does it have to meet a middle?
I think it was a little bit of both. I mean, my college coach wasn't super technical, so it was just like a lot of hitting. Like we would just do like a lot of cross courts, a lot of like match play. So I think in that way, it wasn't that much of a transition. I mean, sometimes he'd give me tips and stuff, but it wasn't like there was no stroke changing or anything like that. And also, I think that I have a pretty high tennis IQ, and I could like sort of figure stuff out on my own. So like I knew what I was doing, why I lost a match or why I won a match, and I could analyze it pretty well myself. So I don't think I, at that point, needed that much because I had developed the skills to be able to figure things out on my own.
Right. Now, let me ask this question of Adam, and then I'll ask of Lexi, because we do get a lot of, this is, you know, would have been an important, now the spring season would have been an important part for the boys that would be playing high school tennis, and the girls, they'd be preparing out there for high school tennis, you know, because their summer, the spring leads into the summer. Now you were also a coach. So, you know, when we talk about R.O.G.Y, we also talk about the yellow ball, you know, for players who are less developed. If you had, you know, if you had to start somebody from scratch, you know, if you had a beginner, whether they're 5, 15, whatever, you know, as a player, as a former player, and I know you also coached a little bit, you know, what would be the key elements that you would touch on? You know, what would sort of be the beginning of your building blocks?
I mean, I think strokes are really important, but I think coordination, athleticism, I think the mental side is probably the biggest of everything, though. I mean, I think the strokes part, the athleticism, I think is like a little bit, you know, some people are just born with it. I think like some aspects of it can be learned, but some people are just naturally, they move better. But I think like preparing someone for the mental battle that is tennis, I mean, like that just comes with, I mean, and I don't know if you can really teach that either, but I think that's what makes people good and great. Like you're able to overcome the mental obstacles that are 2 sets of a tennis match.
Now, what about you, Adam? Obviously, you still do it for a living. You constantly, not only do you get this question, you constantly get this player, right? What's, you know, is there a recipe, or do you take it player by player depending on what they have, don't have athletically?
So define the question again. I think it got.
Sure. At the very beginning, right? So let's say you get a beginner, 5-year-old or a beginner high school girl, you know, and you know, where is there a recipe that you like to go to in terms of like, this is how I'm going to build this?
Okay, so rallying, everything starts with the rally. So, you know, some cross court, they got to be good with the cross court balls, and forehands cross court, backhands cross court, because that's when you start to have fun. To me, it's all about fun, and tennis gets to be fun when you can rally. Okay, if you're starting someone off and they've not played before, to get them to rally is the biggest hurdle. And then once you start to rally, then introducing more fundamentals of you know, directional control, placement, you know, the thing where it says getting it in with spin, placing the ball and then hitting with power, you know, that whole series. And then, you know, playing matches and learning how to win and lose.
Now, one of the things that is very, very different today is not, you know, until very recently, the USTA had the same application for all the tournaments. You could play up in age groups, but you couldn't play down. And then a few years ago, they changed it all with their 10 and under youth progression, right? Now you gotta get X amount of points in a certain level of orange ball to get to the next level of orange ball, you know, X amount of points to get to the green ball, X amount of points to get to the yellow. So sort of this, you know, win out capacity. Now, I certainly could talk about how I approach that, but I think it's more interesting to hear how maybe you guys might approach it. If you had young Lexi today, you know, and you have this system, right? Obviously, in a way, it forces you to be a little bit more equal, right? Everybody in the same age group, 10 and under, has to train with orange balls to begin with. So does that, how much would that have, obviously would it change the training a little bit because you got to win out, but how do you view that?
When you're training your kid and you're competitive, she was very competitive, and even though I say, it's all about fun and this, and we don't care about winning and losing and everything, it's true, but you're also very competitive. You don't stress the winning, but obviously you want to win. Okay, so there's the different levels, and obviously you want to get to the highest level because you're competitive. But you want to get to the highest level as soon as you can. And you want to be competitive, but you also want to develop. So it's about getting the most amount of development while still being as competitive as we were. So.
Well, it's a pull and it's a pull and push, isn't it? I mean, most of the time, I find that with the players like Lexi, it's more of a pull. You're pulling them back.
Right.
I find that younger players, you'd have to do more of the pushing. Players who are still discovering motivation, because I've met very motivated players. They just maybe weren't very motivated when they began. Motivation is like passion. It can ebb and flow and grow and develop. But I think it's definitely a pull-push. And with players like Lexi, I found myself pulling. It's like, look, I want you to win, but I think, as you were saying, their patience, you want to get good results down the line, and you don't want to sacrifice the long-term success just so that you can say, hey, we won the 8 and under title at our local club. It's like, which is great. But that shouldn't be the ultimate goal of a really good junior.
Right. So the beauty of the R.O.G.Y system is that they can play all different parts of the court, and the kids have it much better now with the R.O.G.Y system, and the sort of like stops that they put in. You got to play a few tournaments at this level before you can go to that level. I think that's great, because they're developing at the lower levels. They develop more. They develop more of the shots, the specialty shots. They're better. They're so much better with the continental grips. I see all these kids in especially the edge programs, red ball edge, orange ball edge. They are so much more developed now than she was then, because of the R.O.G.Y system, and because of they're actually competing like they're practicing. Lexi didn't have a decent serve until she was 14, probably, right?
It's never my strength.
12, what? Yeah. She won high school states, and she's 5 in the country. And when she was 12 or 12 and a half, she was still using a Western grip on the serve.
Not 12. Maybe gonna.
Jeez, come on, coach.
So it's much better. All these limitations that they put on the kids, I think, are very good, because they're actually going to develop faster and go further if they develop proper grips at a younger age.
Right.
Well, I'm all for it.
Yeah, I mean, the competitive structure has certainly changed. I mean, one of the things that's changed a lot, and it's not necessarily R.O.G.Y, but it is a big change, is now the UTR system, right? This universal tennis rating, where I know that when Lexi was around, when I was around, it was all like this sort of, you got ranked as a blue chip, 1 star, 2 stars, 3 stars, like football players. The only problem is football, you're never playing against, there's no handicapping system, right? A quarterback in a very, very good high school league may not be as successful as a mediocre quarterback in a really good team in a very small league. I mean, so it's all the 3-star system, but now the UTR has really changed it. I mean, I know you mentioned earlier how you were, traveling around to make sure you met a certain quota of tournaments and ranking points, and you could make the lists. And now with the UTR, I mean, it equalizes so much. I mean, as a college coach, I've had college coaches, I know they still like to do a lot of personal recruiting, but I also know many coaches. I'm very good friends with a friend of mine, one of the best coaches I know around, and Samuel Poole, and he's out in Boston area, and like, you know, he said, with the UTR, you don't have to scout players. The numbers, as long as they played a good amount of tournaments, you know, you'll see them at nationals, but that's just, you know, that's just simply the eye test. You know, the numbers are the numbers. Obviously, you know, if a player is a 14 in the UTR, you know, as a men's college player, you know, they're 14. If they're a 12, they're a 12. If they're a 10, they're a 10. I mean, the recruiting, UTR was not around when you were coming through the high school, right, Lexi? I mean, was it all about, how much did you know about the recruiting process then? Were you trying to make sure you got seen by the right coaches?
I think UTR was around a little bit, but it was like people didn't really know about it. I don't think coaches were using it at all. Tennis recruiting was really big. So it was like, are you a 5-star? Are you a blue chip? That was really big. But I also think like now it's probably there's a lot more pressure surrounding it, just with like, just internet, social media, like everything's just like more, like, I feel like girls in high school just like are more connected to what's going on. I mean, I definitely knew, like, I mean, at the nationals, the coaches were all there watching, but that's like the extent that I knew about what was going on in terms of recruiting. But I mean, I think like emails and letters started coming like sophomore year, maybe freshman.
No, that's great. I mean, what about you, Adam, as a coach? If you had UTR the way it's used now today, would you have maybe stayed home, local? I mean, done more UTR, less traveling? Traveling is expensive.
Yeah.
You know?
I put a lot of miles on my car.
Yeah.
We were going back and forth to upstate New York at least once or twice a month, and to Florida and all other places. So, you know, back then it was the only thing that we knew. We didn't know anything else. You know, this whole thing with UTR, I learned about that when I got to Centercourt. I think it's just Centercourt's making it big. That's how I see it. But it would have freed up so much time. The UTR. I mean, we were a little bit obsessed.
But I think
you could say that.
Just to play devil's advocate, though, I think it did add like a certain amount of like pressure that makes you tougher when like I knew that my parents were like, you know, spending money to like fly us out to Florida or California for this big tournament, and like, I don't know, I think there's something about like playing a UTR match in your backyard that it's like maybe like it's not as big of a deal as if you know, you're flying cross country, you're packing a bag, you're missing school, like this is a big deal. Like it's that pressure that does make you tough. So I don't know, maybe there's something there, but it's interesting.
But that's also like more realistic to college tennis than even the pro tour. You know, these guys are, they're all traveling too. So I guess it's a little more realistic what you were going through with you know, with ITFs and futures and people that travel all over the world.
There's just more on the line. Like I remember, like, you know, the further I traveled, like the more nervous I was for the match, for sure.
Right. So Ari, as we're sort of, you know, getting towards more closer to the end than the beginning, is there any questions out there that I don't want to make sure we don't leave any good questions out there?
And I'll give a broad question. We have a coach. Let me get his name here, from Wyoming. I believe his name is Darren from Wyoming. Wanted to know, he's a high school coach. So I guess it's more for Jose and Adam. Lexi, you can certainly jump in. But what's your advice on high school coaches, beginners? What's the best way to coach a high school beginner, being that, you know, that can be tricky. They're older. A lot of the kids are probably better than them that are on the team. So how do you catch up a 13, 14-year-old kid who's just kind of
that's a terrific question. I mean, I can tell you that, you know, obviously Adam and I get that a lot. I mean, as a director of the junior department, this time of the year we get a lot of that. My girl wants to play tennis in the summer. She really likes it. She wants to go out for high school. She's an 8th grader. That's a typical scenario that I get. And the number one thing that I like to focus on is kind of related to what Lexi and Adam said before. I want to get them hitting and serving as quickly as possible. Make sure they serve a lot. My advice is serve a lot, play a lot of points. They don't have to be matches, but play a lot of drilling that is based on the serve. Rather than feeding balls in, serve it in, play out the point. Even if they're beginners, even if the rally is 2 shots, you know, that's the number one thing to me as a coach. You know, you need to play the point. You need to get the point started. You need to extend the point to win it. So even if it's a beginner, I get them serving because, as Adam mentioned, you know, serve is hard. And it's hard even when you have a natural athlete like a Lexi Borr and, you know, or your sisters, and you get to do a lot of stuff with them, you know, but it's more important. It's even more important when they're, you know, this may be the only way they get into the team, right? Some teams are cut, some teams are no cut. So to me, get playing points. Doesn't have to be pretty, doesn't have to be perfect. Get them playing points, get them serving, get them going. And then the rallying, you know, obviously would have loved to say take lessons, yes. But if it's not realistic, try to get as much rallying as you can, but do it off the serve. Adam?
Same thing. Rallies are key, and serving is key. So, you know, serve in 1, and return and serve in 1.
Okay.
It. Same answer.
Right. I mean, so I'll probably love to get one last question before we kind of go back to the sort of the initial concept of this call. So parent coaches, obviously we cover that this is very much a doable thing. It's not something that parents should say, no coach will ever say it can't be done. Can you give me, you know, the one advice that you would give as a coach parent, Adam, to a potential parent that says, you know, I want to do it, and then I would love to get from Lexi a sort of cautionary point that you would love parents to keep in mind when they're working with their kids. But coach, any piece of advice?
I'd say make it fun and then be funny. while tricking them into developing an entire game and a game style. You know, that you want to have fun and be funny and develop with a purpose. And that's my advice. So if you know, obviously if you have a really tall kid, you can be more offensive minded with your development. And Lexi was shorter, so she was a counterpuncher. So, you know, all the drills and games was to accentuate her physical style of play that she was going to be based on how tall she is. So, Lexi?
And Lexi, any piece of advice as a player towards potential coaching parents?
I think similarly, like, I mean, the relationship has to be healthy and it has to be fun for everyone. I mean, if it's not an enjoyable experience, it's just not going to be sustainable. And then I do think, you know, having a relationship like off the court, like not always, tennis shouldn't be like the entire, it's just life. Like, I think it is easy to just take the tennis court like into the kitchen, you know, into the whole make it everything, but it should be a part of who you are and a part of your life, but it shouldn't be your whole life, because then the pressure becomes too much. So I think there needs to be other interests that you guys do together and like other things that are fun, and like it shouldn't be just like, oh, like every time I see my dad, like it's just going to be like, have you worked on your form? Like, you know, it's just too much.
Right. Well, that certainly, I guess, is a good summary of the things that I, as a coach, will always tell parents. Look, be aware, ask for help if you need it. You know, you can always be the primary coach, but you can get help from other people, and compartmentalize. That's a great advice there that you give learn to compartmentalize. The court stuff stays on the court and the off-court stuff stays off the court. And if you start mixing them, as a coach who's seen it all too often, it can get bad quickly. But, you know, it's But if you can learn how to compartmentalize all those things, I think you can do it very successfully. Look, I call it successful. Your father laughs at me every time I say it, but look, you're talking about a kid who, after he coached her, still comes back to dinner on the weekends. That's success.
You cook, though. You gotta be a good cook.
Well, that too, but they gotta put up with you still, no matter how. So you're a successful parent coach because not only did she achieve, but it wasn't at the price of a relationship.
Right.
I mean, and again, not trying to say that every parent-coach relation, every coach-parent-daughter relationship ends in disaster, but I think we all, me as a parent, potential coach in the future, you know, it really makes you think twice. I don't want to be that cautionary tale. I don't need to be, you know, Mary Pierce's dad or Jelena Dotchik's dad or, you know, Jennifer Capriati's dad. I don't need that. I don't need it, but it's scary. So it's good to know. I mean, then, you know, we started out with the concept, you know, what is different? What hasn't changed? I mean, for me, it's very simple. The ball's allowed to develop more, and what hasn't changed is that you still gotta know when to push, when to pull, and understand your player. I mean, that's one of the things that you're telling me a lot, Adam, when I hear you. It's to understand your player. Do they have the physical and emotional tools to be successful at the next level? You know, make sure that they do as a developmental coach, and then understand who they are. If they're 5'4" and a great counterpuncher, don't try to make them into the next serve and volleyer. You know, Lexi, anything you want to add about, you know, what's in store for junior tennis? I mean, we see it changing constantly, or at the very least, what do you feel is sort of your memory as a junior that is most influential to you now?
I have a good story.
I mean, tennis teaches you so much about life in general, and just having patience and, you know, making the next best decision and just focusing in the moment on what's going on now, not dwelling in the past. I mean, there's so many lessons that I can take from the court, and they apply to my business. And, you know, I have great memories of having fun and being on the court and working hard, but also having fun and enjoying the process. And I have great memories that I always have.
Yeah, Coach, what about for you? I mean, you know, yesterday and today, I mean, what do you see as sort of obvious? I mean, there's a million differences and there's a million things that are the same, but what kind of sticks out to you?
Well, I keep on going back to the R.O.G.Y system, but I think that the players that are coming up now are going to be much better all-court players. They're going to have all the shots at a younger age, and it's going to make for better tennis all the way around. I mean, there were a lot of players in Lexi's generation that, you know, could only do one thing. Either they were really amazing moon ballers, but you know, if you could get them to the net and have them hit a volley, they'd miss. I think that's going to be less and less now. I think everybody's going to be good from just about every part of the court. I don't, you know, if you do the R.O.G.Y system right and you play within your system that you're supposed to be in, you're gonna develop into a better player because you're gonna compete the same way that you train. Yeah. Whereas Lexi, I mean, the training and the competitions had the potential to be so different.
Right. No, it's fascinating. I mean, I know that as we're talking about all this stuff, and that's great. I mean, I also obviously want to remind people that, you know, one of the reasons why we wanted to do this webinar is because there's a lot of myths, right? There's a lot of mythology. Now, I mentioned before and previously I mentioned, you know, certain parents that were more well known for being on the news. And that, of course, is a level of interpretation, right? You know, one of the coaches on the chat mentioned that, you know, I worked with some of the names that you know, some of the parents in different capacities. And, and they were good coaches, and obviously they were. I mean, they did a lot. They helped their daughters, some of the names that I mentioned, to get really far. So they did a lot of good, positive stuff. I think, again, as I say, it is as a parent, as a potential sort of, something that gives you pause. I love tennis as a parent, as a tennis coach. And I think, and I would love to teach my son tennis, but at the same time, it just gives me pause, and, so it's good to hear that it's maybe more of a myth, than what we think. I guess sometimes it's really good TV, and it sells a lot of newspapers to say, to show the photograph of a former junior player struggling through a difficult time in her life or his life, because it's not simply, fathers of junior girls, but, it certainly gives you pause, right? I don't want to be that one parent. I mean, I Coach Adam and I tell the story that I think I'm really well-grounded. I like to be able to think that I can handle it. And then I remember almost getting thrown out of a junior tournament when I was sort of coaching my brother. So, so I know it's not for everyone, and I know it's not a fail-all for everyone. I think it can be done very well, and it can be enjoyed in terms of good long-term happy relationships. So it's good that we can highlight, what you guys do and talk more about that, rather than sort of go down some obvious cheesy, movie of the week kind of topic where, it's always a bad thing. It isn't always bad. But I think, as Lexi says, we've seen it enough in the past that we know it can go wrong if you forget your place, right? What am I? Am I a coach first? Or am I a parent first? And, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes you go into a tournament and, you think tennis is going to be a fair fight, but it's not always a fair fight. There's always things that can influence the game. And, I remember one time, Lexi, it was Thanksgiving, and it was somewhere in New York in a bubble. And her opponent in the finals, they literally rented a bus, and they had like 50 people come and cheer against Lexi's opponent in the final.
Against me.
Against Lexi. And it was like a football game on one side of the court, and Lexi's playing against this girl who's good. And Lexi won. I mean, it was me and two other people cheering for Lexi on the other side of the court. And it was just like a free-for-all. And, Lexi just dug down deep, and every time that people cheered for Lexi's opponent, if Lexi hit a fault right into the net, everybody would stand up screaming and cheering. And but it just made Lexi stronger. And she after that, she says, "I love it when people cheer against me. It makes me play better."
Yeah.
Well,
So,
look, I will always say, because you told me I will say this, Lexi, your dad loves to talk about you and your sisters. Don't want to make it sound like she only talks about you. He talks about you and your sisters, but he loves to talk about, certainly when we talk tennis, we talk about you. And I tell him, man, your daughter was so much of a better competitor than I was. I love to play tennis. I did not love to compete. I mean, and I guess, what I would say is I still came out okay. I still seem to like tennis. I guess tennis has a lot of room for a lot of winning, and winning becomes defined by the individual. You were successful. I feel like I was a successful junior player. I made friends. I played tournaments. I lost to people that were better than me. So I guess one of the things we talk about a lot is patience. You got to also be patient with yourself. You got to know who you are. And kudos to you and your dad for really being able to really understand each other really well. That's fabulous. I know we're running a little bit long, Ari, so I don't want to bore the heck out of anybody. So, for me, it's thank you so much. I mean, you guys have any questions about R.O.G.Y, the development, any questions about anything we left unsaid here, please just feel free to email us. We're we're certainly always happy to talk too much about tennis. Adam, any parting words?
I can't wait to get back on the courts.
Oh yeah. All right, Lexi, any parting words?
No, thanks for having me. This was fun. And if you're in New Jersey and you want some healthy food, the name of my company is Lexi's Kitchen. You can find me at lexiskitchenco.com.
Yeah, no, healthy eating is something we could go on and on about. That's definitely not something that was a big part of tennis 20, 30 years ago. All right, Ari, anything that you want to leave us with? I know we have so few more a webinar coming up, right?
Yeah, I'll just give everybody a little bit of what's going on at the club. We're hoping obviously to open up any day as soon as the governor gives us the okay. So we hope to see everybody back as soon as we are allowed to open. We also have a new product that we've launched a couple weeks ago. It's called Centercourt 360, which is basically almost our, I would call it our, online sports university, where we have AP classes, we have social media classes, biology, chemistry, leadership classes. So I'm going to, feel free to check out our website for our weekly discussions and private tutoring and group tutor options, just centercourtacademy.com, and you can check out the 360 link there. So that's my quick plug on that. Other than that, no, this was a great, great chat. Of course, thanks to Lexi and Adam and to Jose. I've gotten some texts from people that were listening in, and they just love, seeing the chemistry between you guys, between father-daughter, coach. Just, it's impressive, it's unbelievable, and Jose for all of his insight. So I will let Jose finish up, but that's really all I have. We do have actually Matt Ebden is coming on next week, who is, he was ranked about 30th in the world a couple of years ago. He's an Australian player, a great player, so he's going to be on next week. And then we're going to do more discussions with our internal team, with coaches, Jose, and some of the others as well about our programs and our camps. So yeah, thanks to everybody for listening. And Jose, anything you got before we go?
Great. No, thank you so much. It's been great. We love having all these questions. We love having all this interest. The weather's starting to get better. I know some parts of the world are finally back on the court. Yes. We hope to be able to join in here in New Jersey. I know that public courts are open, and hopefully we'll get out there soon as a club. I'm eager to get back and teach and be taught by all these kids. In the meantime, yeah, I would say even if you're back to training on the court, it's a great opportunity to take advantage of a lot of resources. Centercourt offers them, the USPTA offers them, your local coaches offer them, but as Ari says, check out the website. Maybe we can find some things that we can help you guys with. And as always, don't hesitate, send us an email if we didn't answer your question. Thanks a lot to everyone, and we'll see you in the next one.
All right.
Ciao.